I'd like to welcome each one of you to our devotional study today. Take your Bibles, if you would, come with me to Esther chapter 2. Esther chapter 2. And once again, I want to read the passage that we read yesterday as we continue to look at this. It's a lengthy passage, but I want to read the whole thing, as what it does is it looks at the choice that is made by the king and his men. But in reality, we see God working behind the scenes, as we will notice as we move through the book of Esther. So Esther chapter 2, let's begin reading in verse 5. It says, "Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity, which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, with Nebuchadnezzar, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together on the Shushan the palace to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given her out of the king's house, and he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her. Now, when every maid's turn was come to go into King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months according to the manner of women's, for so were the days of their purifications accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of the women. Then thus came every maiden unto the king, whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the women, to the custody of Shashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubine. She came in unto the king no more, even the king, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but what Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed, and Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head, and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast, and he made a release to the provinces, and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not showed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him." So as we've been looking at these, we've been looking at how the process goes for the king to choose a new queen. And certainly as we've been looking at these things, we can see how the providence of God is working here. Maybe for those who were in the story, they could not have seen it. But now as we know the whole picture, we can see how God was working behind the scenes to bring Esther to the forefront, to make her queen, so that she could be used of God to be in the right place at the right time to save the Jewish people. Now, some people would look at this and say, what a coincidence. No, friends, I do not believe this is a coincidence. I believe that it was the providence of God that put Esther in this place, that she would be able to save her people. We see in verses 8 and 9 that Esther was one of those chosen as a candidate to become queen. It says there, "So it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together on the Shushan the palace to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given her out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maidens unto the best place of the house of the women. So Esther, whose name means star, and we're going to see here as we move through this, that she soon would be the star in being used to preserve the Jews from destruction. Friends, we cannot emphasize too much as we go through this study that this was a wicked, sensual plan carried out by wicked men, by the wicked king and his people who he had chosen to rule with him. But yet we will see that God has the last say in this story, as we've already emphasized. In verse 10, Mordecai and Esther were Jews who had hid their racial identity. Notice it says in verse 10, Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred. So that is the king, and the king's men were unaware of Esther's kindred and who Esther's people were. And that Esther, it says, had been charged by Mordecai that she should not show it. That means that they were not observing the law, or they could not have kept it secret. And certainly we don't commend them for this. We don't believe that this was the right thing to do, that they were wrong in doing this. But even here, we see that God used it. Now, this was much different than the mentality that Daniel had. Daniel openly practiced his religion. Remember what we learned in the beginning of the book of Daniel, in Daniel chapter 1 and verse 8. Now, Daniel certainly here is amongst wicked pagan people in Babylon. He's amongst people who do not believe God or do not believe in anything to do with God or the people of God. But the Bible is very clear that Daniel was open and up front about where he was and about the relationship that he had with his God. And in Daniel 1 and in verse 8, it says, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. He said, I don't want to eat this, I don't want to drink this, and this is why. I do not want to defile myself. This is against my God. This is against my relationship with God. This is against who I am as a Jew, and I do not want to defile himself. He kept up his devotion to God all through his life, and it was not a secret service thing. It was not an undercover thing, but he was upfront about his relationship with God. As a matter of fact, when you fast forward to Daniel chapter 7, and he's finding favor with the king, and the people are upset about it. The other rulers are upset about it, and they begin to look and to see what they can bring against him. The Bible is very clear that they could not find anything except it were an accusation between him and his relationship with his God. Even when there was a death penalty added to the law of Persia for worshiping God, and Daniel was told that he was going to be thrown into the lion's den if he prayed to anybody but the king, he did not change. And God protected him in it all. But Daniel was honest and upfront about where he was. In Daniel 6 and verse 7, it says, all the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall pray or ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast in the den of lions. In verse 10, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. Daniel was upfront about his relationship with God, what his God required of him, and he was honest about who he was. And God protected him through it all. Now, Esther and her cousin did not do that. And we certainly do not commend their ways in that. We believe that God could have worked, but God worked in spite of the wrongdoing of all these people to accomplish what it was that he wanted accomplished. Have a great day.